Hello everyone, Denise from Connectarium to have a chat with you about the movement of Mars, the warrior, the god of the war, which represents our action, our motion, our impulse to do stuff, into its sign of rulership, Aries. And what's different this year is that usually Mars spends about 6 weeks in one sign. And this time, in this very atypical year of 2020, Mars is going to go through the whole 6 months through the sign of Aries, from June 27th or 28th, depending on where you are in the planet, until January 6th, 2021. It's a full second half of the year with very emblematic transits, very powerful, very angry, let's say, transits in the second half. I would like to spend some time talking to you about that. And to go through that, I would like to build with you what Mars represents. So I would like to talk about the myth, the symbology behind it, and also the transits. So bear with me here, and I think it's important because Mars is going to talk about our impulse, but also our anger. So it's nice to know first, where is Aries in your chart? Which house, which area of experience in your life is ruled by Aries, because this area is going to be very emphasized, very energized during the second half of the year with a lot of impulse. So it's nice to learn about that. I will also like to share in English also the material I make per sign, so you can have maybe a collective idea for your specific sign, which area Aries is ruling. So you get to know where to pay more attention in regards to this very impulsive energy that we are talking about. So when we talk about Aries, first I would like to talk about it's the ruler, the sign that it rules is Aries and also Scorpio, because now in the modern astrology, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, but in the traditional astrology, it is also considered still a lot. I usually consider Mars, since Pluto was just discovered in 1930. So until then, we didn't know about the existence of Pluto. So Mars is in domicile, that we say, in those two signs. They feel home. That's why it's even more empowered in Aries. It's in detriment. The places where Mars doesn't feel at home are the opposite signs, which are Libra and Taurus, both ruled by Venus. I want to talk about that, about the mythology of Venus, Aphrodite, to explain this counterpart, this shadow of Aries that we can take a lot of advantage by understanding, especially Libra, which is the opposite sign, how we can take advantage of the reconciliation, the facilitation towards relationship to make this very angry Mars that we may come up with in a more harmonic way, okay? The sign of Capricorn is where we consider Mars exalted. It's a sign where it can act in a very constructive and a very, with sustainability that Capricorn, an earth sign, can provide to Mars. And it is in its fall, as we call it in astrology, in the sign of Cancer, because it's a very, very, how can I say, brave and risk-taking sign, energy of Mars, in a sign that is much more about emotions and feeling comfy and nurtured as the sign of Cancer. So there we consider not the best position for Mars. If we think about the glyph as a symbol, right? So it's represented Mars by the perfect sphere of spirit, and the cross of the material world is on the top of the circle. So also implying to us this aspect of instinct of the material world, of action that Mars represents, this spirit of being more instinctive, right? So in the Greek mythology, Mars was the son of Zeus with Hera, and he has two sons, right? Phobos and Deimos. So Deimos is the fear, and Phobos, where the word phobia is coming from, which is the panic and terror. So he was all around those figures in the Greek mythology, more of a very tough warrior. His sister was Aries, the god of discord. So it's all, and we need to pay attention when we are talking about this mythology. We are talking about the 8th and 7th century before Christ era. So we need to understand the historical context where it's placed. And for the Greek folks, war was all about reassuring its identity, conquer things, right? So it was a very important tool at the time. So we're going to see that the Greek Aries, which was the name of Mars in the Greek mythology, was much more about fighting and being more angry. And on the Roman side, it is more the warrior that is protecting, which is the soldier protecting its people. And that's when we see also Mars protecting our ego, our action towards protection, our defensiveness in a more constructive way. So, and Aries in the mythology was used to transport itself with a carriage driven by horses, which used to breathe fire. So again, we're talking a lot about this fiery energy, both because of Mars, and now talking about the sign of Aries, which is a fiery sign. Also, still in mythology, Mars used to have an affair with Aphrodite, Venus, the god of love, of beauty. And it was known that Venus was one of the only figures able to cool down Mars, right, through love. And that's a very interesting metaphor for us to explore this shadow through this tough period of Mars in Aries that we're going to go through, to take the best advantage. There is a passage here from Seneca, the poet, who used to say that Venus, Aphrodite, was the only one to stop the bleedy hands of Mars and used to bring peace into the nations. Also, I would like to share this image with you, which is a Sandro Botticelli art. It's called Venus and Mars, from 1485. And there you see that after love, right, Mars is there really sleepy, really relaxed. Nothing could wake him up, not even the ones trying to steal everything from him, and also playing a sound into his ears, and could not wake him up. So inspiring us to think of how much we need to take the advantage of Venus. And if we think that both of them are from this relationship, harmony, their first daughter was born. So there was the first daughter of Venus and Mars, harmony. So that's a tool for us during this period to explore relationships, explore, listen to others, all that Libra is about, because Mars is about me and myself and how I would like to things to be done, the independence, the audacy, the courage. And Libra is all about us, about the relationships, about considering others. That's very important, and take this inspiration from mythology that could be a very good way out of our possible angry period with very brave Mars in the sign of Aries. So talking a little bit of Aries in itself, right? So it's the first sign of the zodiac, the first one, the fiery side. When we think about this beginning, it takes a lot of energy to start things. We need Aries. Actually, we need the 12 signs. All of us, all the signs have a lot to offer. And we can, every time we talk about a sign or a planet, we need to bear in mind that we can go to its harmonic side or disharmonic side, right? It's all about a polarity. Polarity is the same thing. It only differs in degrees. So if we talk about cold or warm or hot, right? Those are the two things, right? The same thing, two polarities of the same thing called temperature. The same thing with planets and signs. We can go to different directions depending on us, okay? So also another inspiration from images and symbols. On the medieval period, I'm sharing the image with you, there used to have this military instrument called Ariet. I couldn't find the word in English, but it's called Ariet. I think it's coming from a Latin word, but in English it's called battering ram. So was used to open the big gates of the castles, right? Implying this courage, this energy, this power of Aries. So the name is very similar. The basis of the name Ariet comes from Aries, comes from that inspiration too. So when we talk about this power to break our passiveness, right? So when we are passive without motion, it takes a lot of energy to break that, right? So Aries is all about the expression of courage, impulse, individuality. It's the sign that brings us the I am, and it's power to say I am, right? So Aries comes to teach us how to be oneself, right? So it's instinct, it's leadership, it's being very direct, not waiting too long. There is not waiting with Aries. Aries accepts the risk, and Mars being the movement and action in its sign, which is a very impulsive sign, it's all about this agility, this speed that we are going to experience, which, by the way, is very, very different from where Mars is at the moment. Mars is in Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac. It's much lower energy, much more altruistic energy, much more empathic. And now it's going to go to the most initiator, right, of the zodiac, which is Aries. We're going to feel this click, and we need to pay attention on how we react in our lives and how we express that and take care of us before taking any impulsive or aggressive energy into the world. So I would like to share now, how can we take then the characteristics of Aries that we need to take care of and pay a lot of attention, and the ones we can explore, right? Because it's also a very interesting energy at the moment. We all have been in this incubation period in the first half of the year, and now in the second half we have all this energy in our hands. It's good, but how we take care, my biggest concern is how we take care of our anger, right? So what are the things we need to take care? So it's a high individualistic sign, so as to not be so individualistic. The anger, not to be very impulsive or impositive into others. The explosion of this anger, aggressiveness, a high competition. So Aries is all about competition, and it can be seen both ways. Competition can be very good and can be bad if I don't consider others, right? The excess of autonomy, I can do by myself, very independent, which is all the Aries attitude, which again can be, we can take into the polarities, see if it can be good or bad, depending on the direction we go. Very sincere. It's good to be sincere to one extent, right? To be very frank and very direct, not to overdo it, maybe. And on the other side, what are the aspects we can benefit from this period? A lot of energy, vibrancy, put things into movement. So if you have something that is stuck because we were so passive until right now, that you need to take the action and put into movement, that it's great period. Sports, because we're all full of this fiery energy, so we need to put that somewhere, and let's pick the healthy things to do, right? So this physical energy. going direct to the point when we don't want to spend time that you don't need to spend, so you can be direct in a positive way. The courage, being brave, being spontaneous, which is also very, very Aries. Agile and sincere in the positive side. So it's all about this energy, and it is going to be available to us. Now I would like to talk about the transits, and also what is the chart when Mars enters Aries. Usually in astrology we make a chart of the initial period, right? This 0 degree of Aries, of Mars in Aries, gives us a chart. And in this chart, it's first, we already have to pay attention because we have an opposition with the moon, which is going to be in the opposite sign of Libra, already suggesting that we may be very impulsive, very imperative during this period, and we need to recall the need to take Venus into our side. Remember the myth, the one who is able to calm down our energy in a positive way. We have a very good aspect with Saturn in this chart of this initiation of Mars in Aries, suggesting that if we have the ability to put our actions in a constructive way. And it's interesting because Saturn will be in Aquarius when it enters, when this happens, when Mars enters Aries. And 4 days later, it changes signs. It goes back to Capricorn. So Aquarius is suggesting that our actions needs to be towards collaboration, towards including people, take advantage of diversity. It's very open-minded. So our actions towards this open-minded approach. We take care of our high individuality in this chart of the beginning of this movement. And talking a little bit about the transits, we need to understand the context which we are at the moment. We are in a very atypical year with all these concentration of planets in the sign of Capricorn in the beginning of the year. And now they are going to meet again. So as I said, Saturn is going back to Capricorn until the end of the year. They are all in a meeting, Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter. I'm going to talk a little bit about them, and they will have a kind of a fight with Mars, and I'm going to give you the dates. They are kind of in a discussion, right? And if we think this reunion in Capricorn is restructuring society, and Mars is talking about me, myself, individual, how I am in the world. So I'm giving the name of this video, this fight between the power of the self and the power of society, how we make these arrangements and how we overcome this kind of fights we're going to go through, right? So if we think about this big reunion that is expressing itself in this big change in society we are going through with this pandemic, which is almost an excuse for us to really deep dive into ourselves, we are talking about Saturn, the time limit, the restriction for us to see what really matters, a test. What does really work? What does really matter, right? So it's all about what Saturn is saying in this meeting, right? And then we have Pluto in the meeting also saying, okay, we need to die from some aspects of ourselves and rebirth again. Pluto does not have superficial talks. Remember, it's the god of the underworld. It's the god of the underneath. It's all about depth. So Pluto is saying, okay, let's go deep dive. Let's go really understanding what we don't want to see. Let's clean it. Let's regenerate. So we are all purging the difficult things. We are going to these caves, right? And emotional sides. It's tough with Pluto, but it's giving us a chance of rebirth. But we want to rebirth, but we don't want to die. So that's the tricky thing. We need to put our part of us to really let go with Pluto, so another side can give birth again. And then Jupiter in the meeting also saying, okay, guys, Saturn, you are restructuring Pluto. You are making us go into the underneath world. But what about faith? What about the truth? What about our principles? What we are, what are hope? What are our hopes, right? How can we expand? So it's bringing all these maybe religious or philosophical topics into the table. So they are all together. And they will place this kind of noise discussions with Mars, which with the presence of this big meeting, like three gods together, Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, fighting with the warrior. So when is this fight's going to happen? So we have a tricky August, especially the mid-August onwards, the end of September and October, and also December, approximately from 20th to 26th of December. So they are fighting. What can we think about that? So people more angry, more rebellious. I see a lot of this volcano activity, both inside ourselves and maybe outside, because we also, many times those symbolic things also happen physically. So with Mars and Pluto together, the one is the god of the underworld, the other is the warrior. It's gonna put our dragons into action. So my invitation here, especially if you got to the end of this, almost to the end of this video, is what do we do with that, right? Because we are going to have much more access to our angry aspects. And my whole invitation to you is, how can you use Mars in a constructive way, dealing with your anger and not taking it to the world, right? The world is already going to be very rebellious. So how can we make our individual action not to add, not to sum up those energies into destruction, aggressiveness, rebellion, and taking it to the defense, constructive, energetic way of Mars acting in our lives? How can you use that into your projects, make actions that we need to take actions into your life? Important, Mars is going to retrograde from September 9th until November the 13th. During this retrogression period, we can expect some turnarounds. So maybe things that we are going in one direction, we go in another direction. We stop things that are going and we start again things that were stopped. We're going to see this movement happening, right? And I think we're going to have this chance of reprogramming the way we act. That's a big invitation to reprogramming those ways. And that's what I would like to bring to you, all these questions and invitation to put your life into action in a very constructive way, taking this advantage. And I think the biggest advice is take care of your anger and make peace with that. Use the good aspects of Venus as a counterpart, as the lover of Mars, and take love into other people's lives so we can make the best use of this time. So let me know how it feels to you, if it makes sense. Let me know your feedbacks. I would love to hear. Thank you for being here with me, for making company, and be curious to understand a little bit more of all this symbolic aspect. It's a language. Astrology is a language, and it's so powerful. It's a GPS on the top of our heads. And I'll see you around. Thank you, and a wonderful season of Mars and Aries to you all. Take care.